Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in inMendham and such. I'm going to do something a little different than usual routine. So I won't play a video I already made, but there is a video I already made that you should watch because I'm not going to play it, and so you're not going to get the summary of it beyond me just paraphrasing what it's about. So it's about, there was two journalists, low watt hacks who contacted me, in light of the crap, the media hype over the acting up, the activism taken to some bizarre extreme event. And because of that event, okay, there's something called interest, and the interest is apparently in just blaming something, okay, and saying there, it's that thing's fault, and we'll just fix that and this won't happen anymore. Crazy fanatics won't do stupid moronic things in their crazy fanatic strategy thing. So somehow crazy Muslims won't fatwa and do all that other kind of crap, and all of a sudden there'll be peace and quiet in the world because somehow you'll get rid of any kind of dissension because you shut everybody up who dissented or something like that. Anyway, so both claim to be doing some sort of honest reporting. And it has nothing to do with doing anything honest. It just has to do with demonizing, and again, trying to push this onto somebody's fault and say that's the cause of it, some bad acting somewhere. And so both were portraying me as the bad actor, that somehow I brainwashed people to be assholes. And no, it doesn't happen. Hasn't happened. Isn't true. And I do exactly the opposite, would be the fact, right? If you paid any attention to my videos, you know that, I even try to convince people not to commit suicide. As much as I empathize with, people's pain and suffering, I try to encourage them to stick around and fight in the reasonable and fair manner, to make arguments and be here to support arguments and be here to vote correctly and do all that kind of stuff. And clearly I don't advocate any kind of protesting, no. So it's all just bullshit to paint, and again, it's just a simple philosophy. The simple philosophy is, yes, if you're here on Earth and you recognize there's no God and it's not intelligent design, then you have to understand it's unintelligent design. And something unintelligent design is going to have flaws, and this happens to have a catastrophic flaw called death and destruction, and that everything has to be killed. And because it's a DNA molecule being modified to create better future fighters in a gladiator war, a bunch of things have to be killed, living a very short life and a very hard death. And that is not a good thing. It's not reasonable. It's not sensible. It's not logical. It's not intelligent. It's something a dumb system figures out. It's not something a smart system figures out. So anyway, and it's unprofitable. It's running a deficit. It's wasting torture, which is arguably the most important thing in the universe, torture. There's nothing more important than torture, and we're wasting it. So, and the simple argument is do you do something about it? The simpler argument, do you recognize it exists? Okay, so let's just say that people do recognize it exists and call themselves some name. And, and there probably should be some name for people who think, yes, it exists, and we probably, since we're the smartest thing known to exist in the universe, we should probably try to apply some of our smarts to mitigate against it. The waste of torture. It's not a smart thing to waste torture. and it is squandered and wasted. Well, anyway, so these two journalists, quote unquote, anyway, contacted me and wanted conversations, and I wasn't interested. And but I would answer questions, so they submitted questions, and I answered the questions. And those questions and answers really had nothing to do with anything they published. So I just thought it was important for me to just set the record straight, that I was willing to defend my position. They just didn't bother publishing my defense, and that's the truth of it. Yeah. So anyway, so the woman journalist wrote a pile of crap. Now, a woman who goes under a fake name, all right, and doesn't think doxing is a real thing, okay, and if you ask her not to dox you, that somehow you've, you're requesting way too much, asking way too much, even though she hides her own identity. So it's just, again, the duplicity and hypocrisy of these people. They know it's a dangerous thing. They don't care. They don't care about jeopardizing your security or the people, your neighbors, or somebody else being harassed. But their neighbors are important, and their security is important. It's just so laughably duplicitous. But anyway, and so yeah, she introduced herself as being somebody who just cares about the truth, and I'm just trying to do an honest job, and blah blah. It's not going to be a hit piece, and all it was some bizarre crap demonizing me as some long-haired basement-dwelling person with images behind him and blah 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 blah, doing hysterical videos when we know that. No, I'm just making videos just pointing out that there's, a reality we exist in, and most philosophy doesn't have anything to do with that reality, which is a DNA molecule evolving. And that it's, you can get into determinism and all the other stuff that's part of the subject, and you just don't want to hear that there's no free willy, and, that reality sucks. And that's a simple truth. Because there's some sort of, she has some empathy with religion, in the sense that she thinks those authorities are providing something called wisdom, that the preachers are making humans wise. So yeah, who believes that? Who should believe that, right? Nonsense. Well, anyway, so she's just terribly duplicitous, and she writes just slandery crap, hacky crap about stuff that isn't real, connections that aren't real, associations that aren't real, that have nothing to do with anything. Certainly there's a few videos on a few subjects where I say things I probably shouldn't say, and they're said in an atmosphere of, you don't take it all seriously. So again, if I suggested that speeders, the cops ought to have, grenade launchers and just blow their car up, yeah, oh, you're going to take that seriously? But anyway, that kind of horse shit. And they think out of thousands of videos that 4 or 7 videos where I probably went too far, I said too much, I was a little reckless, a little sloppy. Yeah, we'll just say forget the 2,000 videos. Let's just pay attention to these 4 that aren't even on the subject, frankly. And it's just so ridiculous to have to defend myself against myself when it's a part of myself that is so distinctly tiny, okay, and so minuscule. It's like finding one mole in somewhere and saying, defend the mole. No, I don't have to defend it. Okay, the one freckle. Fuck you. Too ridiculous. In that context, so again, you should watch the first video because I just read the questions and answers that she provided. And in this case, the other guy, liar, he made a counter argument in a sense, and I just took point by point and deconstructed his nonsense, and so I'll go through that in this video. And that should sum it up. So again, the doxing thing, you know, you don't want to go on and on about it, but the fact is, I have been swatted. All right, cops have been at my house for no reason because somebody called them up and lied. And you're just saying that kind of behavior is okay when all you can do is obsess about somebody's legal name and what state they live in and what they did, all this stuff. You're just obsessing to try to, you know, make a target. Here's the target. You're creating it. And so these are people arguing that somehow I've incited that kind of behavior in people, that somehow I've encouraged it when they're the ones doing it. I've never said, go after fertility clinics or go save animals from some fucking medical institution or I've never suggested any targets. I've never suggested any reason to go after anything except to make arguments. And, you know, again, these duplicitous hypocrites who are trying to villainize and make something a target. So if they're one of their fanatics, if one of the fanatics that reads one of their hysterical, exaggerated nonsense, demonizing bullshit journalism where they've demonized somebody as the Antichrist and then basically directed people to go there and do something about it, they're the ones inciting it. See, there's just, again, the duplicity of these people. But that's the whole thing. There's no journalism. There's just propaganda, and you know, everybody's just a propagandist for some self-serving pile of shit, and nobody really gives a damn about fucking goddamn thing called the truth or facts. All right. So in that context, I think that's enough said. Leave us proceed. So he said, would you be so kind as to share your thoughts about these subjects on the record, please? Yeah, like all these videos aren't on the record already. 30,000 of them. I've made some 30,000 public videos over the last 20 years, and there isn't a thought I haven't shared. So, yeah, I mean, it's just such a joke to say that somebody even needs to interview me or needs to somehow glean something from me when it's all there. And like I said, you can find the worst of me or the best of me, and it's just, that's your choice. So you can either defeat my best argument or you can defeat my worst argument, and that reveals your character. That doesn't say anything about me. It says something about you. Okay. You have devoted a great deal of time and thought to developing ethylism as a philosophy. Yet you patronizingly advise me to think long and hard. So later he, tells me to think long and hard about your answers. Like, this is serious. Yeah, right. Anyway, and I'm generally interested to see how you respond to vigorous questions, vigorous ones. And I generally doubt your motivations, was my response. This isn't his motivation. His motivation isn't to get to the truth, because the truth is very simple. I am an atheist. I recognize that evolution is unintelligent design, and I can see the function of animals eating each other and say, stupid. Well, there's got to be a better way, right? I mean, eating each other alive, there's got to be a better way, okay, for the little circle of life to happen than destroying each other in just about the worst way possible. Yeah, so if you're going to have a war, this is the worst kind of war, where you tear each other apart physically with your bare hands. Yeah, that's about the worst way you could do it, right? All right, and if you do respond, I think long and hard about what you say. So again, I need this patronizing asshole to tell me to think about what I'm thinking about. What does he say? What does he do? What does he publish? What has he done with his time except exploit? So this is a guy who just exploits murder stories of some kind or other. Some sort of heinous bullshit, and he shows up to describe the scene. Yeah, to bullshit all over it. All right, I always think carefully. It's the mindless culture you defend that is reckless in its waste and foolishness. The whole welfare state thing, the whole, yeah, let's pay people to have illegitimate children. Let's make it very profitable to do that. That kind of nonsense. Have you investigated my Draft Science YouTube channel? So just trying to encourage him to go take a peek at his world of propaganda and nonsense, where they've established the truth that things are entangled and it's all wavicles and all the other fairy tale crap that comes out of physics. All right, before driving into Efilism, I have a few personal questions for you. So I say, obviously, not terribly interested in getting personal. But if I was, I would ask, but how do you feel about making a living off tragedy of others? So that's all he's really doing. You're just selling bloody popcorn to a hungry crowd of ghouls. Yeah. So anyway, and so he says, how are you holding up? Have Steffi Tinney's and Guy Burkus's deaths affected you emotionally? Are other reporters reaching out to you? Have you heard from the FBI? What about Reddit banning threads on Efilism? So I never even went to a Reddit. What's your reaction to that? inMendham and Efilism are being hammered online forums. So how am I being hammered? Exactly how is anything I've advocated or said or done have anything to do with any of this horse shit? Oh, that's right. Doesn't have anything to do with it. Is that tough to take? Well, yes, being lied and maligned for crimes I haven't committed, it really does bother me, yes. Do you have a support system for dealing with it all? Like what? Yeah, a mob? Oh, just, Anyway, all irrelevant mush, clearly. I defend fact-based perception of reality. Those arguments are not changed by any of this. All causes have bad advocates. Let me repeat that in all capitals. All causes have bad advocates. So anyway. So then he has lack of consent is a title to his next little pile of shit. So I say, a plain, simple, decisive argument against procreation. I mean, really. I mean, somebody arguing, okay, I mean, there are anti-nihilists who don't think the lack of consent argument is decisive, but in my opinion, it's decisive, because if you really push somebody on it, there's no way of extracting anything but you're an arrogant, rude asshole. So if you're ever imposing risk on somebody else, there's nothing else to say but you're arrogant and rude and obnoxious. Okay, no rational person could call life harmless or void of substantial risk. Imposing such a gift is plainly arrogant and obnoxious to decency. Now, whether or not it's legally a crime, right? The fact that we haven't criminalized it, like slavery or something, doesn't mean it isn't just that bad. It's a fucking crime to sit there and, arrogantly saying, I believe in a fable about heaven and hell, and I'm going to have a kid and he's going to navigate properly through all of that nonsense and go to heaven, and so it'll be worth him being born because he gets to go to heaven. Some sort of irrational slop. And this asshole has the arrogance to say, I'm going to force your existence in this fake context as if you're going to live in that fake world. No, it's not going to live in that fake world. It's going to live in a world where it could get cancer when it's 10 years old. That's the world it's going to be born into. And that's not obnoxious? Yeah, no, that is obnoxious. It's rude and obnoxious. Arrogant. Nasty. To impose risk on somebody else always sucks. Yes, there's times when it's necessary, like you got to go get food from the store. So, yeah, you have to drive on the road. Okay, and the risk is your car might go wacky and kill somebody or paralyze them for life. So you're imposing a risk, but it's a defendable circumstance. But most circumstances where people are doing the imposing, it's not defendable. It's not for some necessity. It's for some silly whim. All right, anyway. Efilism places a high value on consent or lack thereof. Yes, because it's really a good argument. Forcing someone to live your values should require substantial good cause. So that's, and the good cause is what? I think so. That's their good cause. I think they'll have a good life. That they'll, at the end of their life, they'll say, gee, I'm so happy I was given the opportunity to play life. Okay, even though it was all preordained what I was going to do and how I was going to behave and everything because of where I was born and who I was born to. Yeah, even though it's just a broken record, frankly, a redundant, silly song being sung. But the fact is that's not the outcome guaranteed, and that's the obnoxious part. All right, so how about this? Much of what happens to us without our consent. So because other things happen to us without consent, besides being born, somehow not having consent isn't important. And that's, so I say, correct. That's why you don't initiate the flawed experiment. So an experiment that contains a bunch of lack of consent and a bunch of imposition is not an experiment you endorse. It's one you say, fuck that, don't bother. I mean, if you can't do it without being impositional, then maybe it shouldn't be done. And if you're going to say it can be done or it has to be done, then you have to show us what you're producing that's worth imposing the risk. All right. For example, I got stuck in a long traffic light this morning, didn't consent to this. Around noon, I felt hungry. Again, no consent. The hotter outside, I would get consent to if it were given a choice. So here we go. So I just, I'm kind of the opinion that people who trivialize things like pancreatic cancer should get what they deserve. Right? I mean, the very idea of talking about torture and saying, I'm going to trivialize it as I had to wait in traffic, that's what it's about. The subject isn't waiting in traffic. The subject is getting eaten alive by a crocodile. That's the subject. Getting torn to pieces and slowly dying. Or getting a disease that slowly destroys you physically. So yes, people who trivialize that kind of exposure, that kind of reality, in my opinion, just can't get it any worse than they're going to get it. I mean, they just deserve the worst of it. If somebody has to get the worst of it, it should be them who trivialize it. All right, on what basis does evolution place a high value on consent, to the point where lack of consent outweighs creation of human life itself? So again, what's the value in creating life? So just making humans anywhere is always a good thing. Yeah, that's just, wow, it's just so good. It's like $1 billion every time you poof a human cell, you fertilize one. Oh, that's $1 billion invention. It's, it's just worth, yes, you can torture lots of stuff because that's just so special. You're claiming there is value to creating life? ? Well, there's value. Like I said, I could just make one, put it in a spaceship, shoot it into space, and I've made value by making a living thing. Too ridiculous. So Mars is in some terribly deprivated state because it doesn't have great white sharks swimming in its oceans. Swimming in oceans. Obviously it doesn't have any oceans. So that's their argument, that somehow without carnage, without animals eating each other, that somehow matter isn't doing what it really needs to be doing because it's so much improved. If the matter can be in a form where they can feel and torture each other, that is so much superior to it just being rocks and, fluids. Yeah, that's so much better. Fluids that can be tortured. Yes, that's so much better. All right, anyway, I say preventing suffering is good and preventing life isn't bad. That's just the simple truth. If I prevent the existence of a living thing, I haven't done anything bad. There's nothing bad happening on Mars. It's not in a negative condition. Okay. In other words, why do you think consent is so important? So he says it 14 different ways. I shouldn't have to explain to an adult why consent is important when imposing risk. Right? I really shouldn't, right? The fact that you shouldn't be imposing a risk on somebody without them saying, yes, please go ahead and risk you know. If I'm feeling lucky, should I steal your nest egg and go gambling with it in Las Vegas because I know it will be good for you without your consent? So, yeah, you should. I should just impose risk, right? I should just, you know, I could offer to cut your grass, and I could know that my lawnmower might explode and spill gasoline all over your house and catch it on fire. Now, I know it's it's only a 1 in 1,000 chance. Yeah, it's only 1 in 1,000. But I shouldn't tell you about the risk, and you shouldn't concede that, okay, yes, it's worth having my grass cut. Yes, I don't have house insurance, and yes, you could burn down my house, but it's okay. Go ahead and do it. All right, so he says, guy compared lack of consent to his being born to a woman being raped when she's unconscious. I don't care. But humans via the law and initiate notions of right and wrong have decided that in that case of an unconscious woman, consent is required. So, I mean, obviously consent should always be required. Anyway, I told the guy, look, I'm not going to respond to, I'll defend my philosophy. I'm not defending somebody else's. What if the unconscious woman needed emergency surgery in order to live, but was able to give consent? Should the surgery be withheld even if she wouldn't have wanted it? Well, of course, if she wouldn't have wanted it, it should have not been imposed. So, anyway, if she would have wanted it. So I have to point out, society has practically responded to these dilemmas. Living wills and do not resuscitate bracelets, for example. Suppose the woman has cancer. Would you impose chemotherapy? Because she's unconscious and she can't tell you not to. You have a right to do it? No. It's always going to be a subject. It's always important. People are going to strive to understand what the woman would want. They'd find out what she wants. Would have wanted. As for consent to being born, as an example, my parents made the decision to procreate on their own reasons and urges, such biological imperative or desire to have a son to carry on the family name. So those are pretty lame excuses. I don't even know what a biological imperative is, frankly. You can't afford the condom? I mean, what's the biological imperative? Anyway, I did get my parents to admit that they had 4 kids for no good reason, that they never really considered all of the what-if questions. One of my sisters died at 32 after a long, brutal fight with cancer. My parents admitted that no one who is rational and decent gets over it. Yeah, no, it ruins you. And it's a fact, and it's nasty, and it's horrible, and that's all you could say. And yes, people endure, okay, and they endeavor to persevere because they're still alive, and they need to find some way to live with it. But the fact is, they admitted that, yes, it was a mistake. They didn't appreciate what they were playing with. They didn't know it was explosively dangerous. They admitted it would have been better if they had devoted themselves to traveling the world rather than creating living beings. So the fact is they, in hindsight, recognized that they didn't really think about it, and they made a sloppy and stupid decision rather than a thoughtful one. All right, biology, he says. I had heard of condoms long before I had need to use one, so there's no biology that requires us to procreate. So we know that it's by volition, not biology, okay? The sperm don't decide if you decide for them. That's the simple truth. We can decide for them. They are stoppable. Okay, eons of human practices and traditions, so that's just hilarious. Primitive, stupid behavior. I mean, the historical record is so ugly and brutal, and yet he's using that as a defense. Anyway, eons of mysticism and voodoo, throwing virgins into volcanoes or Jews into concentration camps. Why don't you do an investigative report on a pig's life? Go interview a dead bull slowly killed for the crowd. We are mired right in the middle of idiocracy, and you're going to pretend humans have some respectable traditions? Yeah, it's just laughable. Hilarious. Okay, and the law pretty much everywhere in the world granted them the right to bring a baby into the world. So this is their defense. It's always been legal. So again, it's just right. So slavery should be legal because it was legal. You know, if someday vegans were 70% of the population, would you concede they would have the right to outlaw animal farming? So that's a pretty simple enough question, right? I mean, can anybody rational say no, they wouldn't have the right? That the majority really wouldn't have a right to legislate what it thinks is right and wrong? All right, slavery was legal for hundreds of years. Let's not pretend that because something was illegal, it was rational. So clearly I'm arguing there's nothing rational for the torture price we're paying. We're paying a huge amount of torture for frivolous and trivial pleasures. Just a fact, and it's disgusting. Okay, and that baby was me. Always trying to make things personal. You know, I mean, it's just... You know. The fact that you're a happy exploitionist glutton doesn't mean much. What if your opposite doppelganger was the product of their love? Would you arrogantly claim his pain is worth it? So it's too bad we don't get answers to my questions. Why should my lack of consent outweigh their rights? Their rights to what? Violate, to impose risk. So again, why should the right to impose risk be casually, liberally protected? All right. The simple argument is acting without consent requires a degree of certainty. Let's say the highest degree of certainty. If you are certain that your life loving is reasonable, you are certain that the 10 dead lion cubs are worth the one mature lion that will horribly die also. Are you certain? So it was a question. I should have put a question mark. So is you know, simple enough question. They really won't answer the question. I don't think anybody's ever really said it. You know, that yes, I would go kick 9 lion cubs to death, okay, to save one. You know, also assume for the sake of discussion that, you know, to save one meaning just to lengthen one's life. Also, assume for the sake of discussion that the vast majority of humans would have given their consent to being born and that they have been allowed the opportunity. Should the small minority of humans who would not have consented outweigh the rights of the vast majority? So again, it's just this majority thing controlling, and it doesn't matter how doped up the majority is on delusions and nonsense. So the majority is a bunch of people who believe in witches and they burn them on stakes. That somehow is a defendable circumstance. And I'm arguing, of course, it's not. So if something is imposed, made 10 people happy like going to Disneyland, and one person violently ill, would you go ahead and do the imposing? So again, it's another simple question. I mean, I could never do that to somebody. I would say, fuck Disneyland. Yeah, well, I don't need to go. You know, it's going to be, if it's going to horribly hurt somebody, why the fuck would I think it's important, right? So if you're not really on a rescue mission, if you're not preventing harm, you really can't impose harm. All right. Avoidance of suffering, a key ethical underpinning of ethilism, seems to be avoidance of suffering. Avoidance of suffering, a key... Oh, okay, so that was the title. And that was a key ethical underpinning is suffering. So again, they want to turn this into Buddhism or something, and that's not what it is. The key underpinning is atheism, is recognizing, you know, that's really the key. Do not God. The idea is that there's no reason to think the system is clever. Okay, and a fair recognition that evolution is not an intelligent designer. I would argue the only value in the universe is the welfare of feeling organisms. The ethic is you do not waste suffering. I should just put torture. It is clearly reasonable to endure a small misery to prevent a large misery. Why is this of such importance? You know, I have to explain why torture is an important concept. So again, that's where you're just saying, what, we really can't communicate, right? Because you're not getting any of this conversation at all. You just don't think it matters how much torment and suffering is endured. Whatever amount it is, it's fine, it's acceptable. You'll just declare any amount acceptable. I could double how many people were raped and killed and murdered and slowly died in World War II, and you'd still say it's fine. Yeah, it's you know, oh yeah, it's a little messy, but so what? We're way ahead. You know, our profits are so high. You know, we're doing so many special, great things that it's worth it. Are you assuming that suffering is per se bad? So again, it's just like, well, why am I having a conversation for somebody who can't figure out that, of course, it's by its very nature bad. Okay, whether or not it's a bad, you know, a justifiable bad is the whole question. Again, and the only way you can really justify it is it has to prevent a bigger harm. And there's no way it can do that. Of course, it's per se bad. Feelings generally fall into two categories, good and bad. Your feelings are desirable and undesirable by their essential nature, elemental nature, not by interpretation. You know, we don't get to have an opinion. Okay, I feel it. There's no opinion involved. It either feels good or it feels bad. Okay, are you some type of nihilist who doesn't think value, and more specifically negative bad value, exists? I mean, it clearly happens to sentient organisms. They have bad experiences that would be better not to have happened. Fact. Okay. What if such a suffering teaches lessons? It is a sad truth that you can't interview the dead. I would argue that if you honestly contemplate the subject, you would concede that after a long, slow, miserable death, many of the dead would be less than enthusiastic regarding doing it again. I've used my grandmother as an example, you know, where she lived a tough, stoic life, you know, and, you know, would have been happy to sing her little song at 80 years old, or at 75 even, you know, I did it my way, blah, 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 graceful end. But it didn't really happen that way. And she lived all the way up to 100, feeling pretty good. And then, but the last 5 years or so, not so good at all. Really, in the last 2 years, just absolute torment. And so you're arguing, you know, at 107, that, you know, the system was still trying to force her to stay alive. And they didn't care about torturing her to do it. And, you know, and the fact is I have every confidence that, you know, if she had the bargain of having to relive her life, that if it included that ending again, she'd say, fuck it, it ain't worth doing that all over again. And I think that's the truth for a lot of people, that any value their life had as a living experience was completely destroyed by their horrible death. 10 years, my grandfather, 10 years in a nursing home. Yeah. I don't think he'd do that 10 years again. Anyway, enables achievements. Satisfying needs that don't need to exist is not a net positive accomplishment. So there's really no achievements here. So to talk about achievements in what? There's only making bad things less bad. If you never made the bad in the first place, you don't have to make the bad less bad. So again, these are all needs that don't need to exist. We're satisfying needs that don't need to exist. That's the dilemma. Or simply exists because it exists. So this is real baby talk. The fact that something exists doesn't mean it exists for a good reason. So that's just too obvious. Does the fact that it's a bummer sometimes to sentient beings mean it's wrong? So again, he's trivializing torturous death. All right. Calling things like pancreatic cancer a bummer makes you describable as a glib asshole. I mean, it's just so disgusting to keep trying to turn the real hard time that sentient organisms have to spend in torture and turn it all into stub toe is just so disgusting. Cretinously disgusting that somebody would do that. Take a little break. Alright, continuing. Alright, so also there are degrees of suffering. I've suffered being ill or injured, but the experience have made me more appreciative of healthy days. Well, what if they made you more capable of recognizing how much worse you could get it, and that you got off easy, okay, and that other people are getting off a lot worse, and that's the price of you getting off easy, is they're getting off worse. Okay, and empathetic towards others, which, anyway. So I say what's in doubt here, from my perspective, is any sincerity regarding your empathy for others. So I don't buy that he is capable of manifesting any sincere appreciation for the suffering others experience to advance his existence. And again, all the animals he no doubt tortures for his trivial gratifications. Is all suffering bad, or only the worst of suffering? Well, obviously all suffering is bad. If you could eliminate all suffering, why wouldn't you do it? Should we have any headaches at all? Are headaches useful in some way? No, they're not. Okay, who decides where that line is drawn? My philosophical argument is that waste is always waste, and degree is quite irrelevant. You're saying that life, on balance, is a good deal. I'm saying you can't create anything or do anything that is worth imposing cancer on just one child. So I've said it pretty clearly that I wouldn't do it for one, I wouldn't impose it on a rabbit. I wouldn't impose it on anything should be harmed, because I can't for the life of me figure out what the fuck the value is. Again, what are we actually producing that is necessary, in the sense that how does it benefit the universe? And it just doesn't. It doesn't create any benefit. It just creates the opportunity to lose torture, to pay it for nothing. Alright, your silly delusions that being alive accomplishes something is just your silly delusion. So that's the simple statement. So go ahead, demonstrate to me with some sort of reasoning how being alive accomplishes something. That being a sentient, feeling organism in a deterministic, mechanical universe accomplishes something. Alright. On what basis does avoidance of suffering outweigh the value of sentient life? So again, the value of sentient life, the existence of sentient life is somehow innately valuable. We should in fact put feeling things on Mars because somehow it will be good for them. So if we built an ocean on Mars and filled it full of fish and then put the sharks and the other shit in there to eat the fish, and they just did this everyday routine of trying to eke out an existence by eating each other, that's great stuff. You can't make a better movie than that. Shit. Alright, without spouting some religious crap, can you explain what the value of sentient life is? So that's the key thing. Explain to me how being a feeling organism and being capable of being tortured somehow advances the universe. Right. Clearly the universe doesn't have some negative condition that living things fix. So there is no prison, there is no dungeon for which you have released the poor entrappees. You're not saving the drowning. You're not doing anything. There's no rescue here. Okay. What does your sentient life do to improve the universe? So please, anybody who has this pro-life perspective, answer the question. What is the answer to that question? What exactly does life do to advance the condition of the universe? How is it innately a better universe with feeling things in it? Let's see. Would joy and happiness even exist, but for the contrast with sadness and suffering? So he's conceding the point. I can't figure out I feel good unless I know what feeling bad is, and that's the catch. That's all you're doing. You're just feeling less bad, and you think I'm winning because I feel less bad. Too stupid. All right, day and night, life and death, yin and yang. So this is all babbly philosophy. Aren't these counterpoints the way of the universe? No, they really aren't. The way of whatever that is, the way of the universe. You still have to explain how the fuck I need yin and yang. Where do I need yin and yang? Where do I need that? Where do I need day and night? Why is that even I don't need it. Why does the universe even need it? It doesn't. What basis does Efilism have for pronouncing this wrong? Wasted torture. Fuck. I'll just remake the argument. So if you had to be evolution's thug and personally had to kick to death 10 lion cubs so one of them could reach sexual maturity, you would have no apprehension in fulfilling your duty. So that's the point. If you're going to tell me that, yes, you would do it, you would be okay with it. I don't mind. I don't mind stomping the little critters to death, okay, because it's going to be worth it when the one of them jizzes, and fertilizes an egg. Well, a few eggs. That'll be worth it. And then we kill it. Maybe even before its cubs are grown up. Yeah. Unintended consequences. Do the actions of Guy and Sophie cause you to question Efilism or the efforts to advance the philosophy? I'll answer the generic question. Should all causes be banned because some members are crazy? Let's prohibit Muslims. Now, actually, that's a good, frankly, the percentage of Muslims who are at minimum silly fucks and at maximum dangerous fucks is so high that, yeah, that would be worth prohibiting. Let's prohibit Catholicism. Obviously facilitates child molesting. There have been many instances of vegans going too far, so let's ban that too, etc., etc. So obviously this is demonizing anything, okay, based on bad actors is just cheap. It's just cheating. So again, should we blame the Ku Klux Klan on Christianity, right? It's always associated with Christianity. They're burning crosses on people's lawns. It'd be ridiculous to say that's Christianity. All right. It seems clear that you were an important influence. So there's no clarity here. Okay. On both Guy and Sophie, do you feel the philosophy gave them a framework or excuse for, as you might say, acting out? So again, where would that excuse be? Not in anything I said. So in everything I say, I'm saying don't kill yourself and don't be a shitty soldier. And somehow that means I'm suggesting, yes, kill yourself and be a shitty soldier. No, that's not what I'm suggesting. Going forward, do you plan to change anything with your website or videos? Add warnings. So again, delete anything. A few abortion doctors have been killed by fanatic Christians. Should we put warning labels on churches? I mean, really, this is what they, it's just so, it's obviously a double standard. There's duplicity here. This is just hypocrisy. Obviously, they don't want to take responsibility for what their rhetoric causes people to do. They don't want to take responsibility for what they embrace or endorse or give excuses to. Just amazing hypocrisy. Just so obvious, this hypocrisy, that somehow, even though there's nothing I said to encourage any kind of social bullshit, acting up, that somehow I'm responsible for acting up. No. I never preached that. Okay. If people point fingers at you as being some measure of ethical responsibility for violent outcomes you didn't intend. No, it's not that I didn't intend. I didn't suggest, and I actually suggested against them. I argued against them. Okay, how will you respond? Well, I'll respond with the point that I've argued against such nonsense. Okay, are there latent dangers in Efilism for people who are young, weak-minded? There's always dangers when a person is young and weak-minded. That's dangerous. Period. No matter what they believe. Okay. Or how did you say it on Sunday's video? Crazy. Yeah, so again, I've also related the point that when I was younger, I had such thoughts. They would run through my head of, some people, my mother told me about when she thought of suicide, she thought of just driving off of a bridge. Well, I would thought, well, if I'm going to kill myself, I might as well kill myself and take out some nasty criminals, at the same time. So I'll find the worst character I can imagine and drive my car into that. So, the fact that people have these thoughts doesn't mean they're going to act on them. And, but the truth is that, yeah, there's a certain logic to it you can't deny. So it's not like I can say, well, yeah, that's completely insane. I mean, not all vigilantes were wrong, okay? But obviously you can make the argument that, yeah, it's just not it's not the way you should fight the fight. The fight should be a fair fight. You do this with some kind of dignity. And that's sort of breaking the rules. All right, so you don't think there are any crazy religious people. I don't advocate action, I advocate argument. So it's clear in every fucking video. I do not encourage or incite any social action, let alone social violence. I don't like protesters. I've said it in lots of... I don't even like protesting. I don't think people should be able to block highways and do all kinds of other acting up, okay, because they have some cause, that they should be allowed to disturb everybody else and impose their agenda. They should have a nice free speech right, and people should listen if they want to. They shouldn't be forced to listen. Okay. Here's a final question. Did Guy and Sophie consent to the effect that Efilism apparently had on them? So again, there's an apparent effect. What was the apparent effect? Did Efilism make them miserable? Did Efilism ruin their life? Did Efilism treat them badly? No, none of that happened. They came here, all right, already miserable. You have no evidence they did not invent their own philosophical perspective from their own personal experience. So just none. Okay, no evidence that, and even if it were true that somebody came to one of my videos perfectly happy and delusional, and I suggested there's a reality, okay, that, it's a fact that you're torturing animals with your diet, and just the very fact that you're breathing oxygen in a biosphere that demands millions or billions of animals must be tortured to death, and that depresses them. I did something wrong? I mean, again, so you're saying any truth that causes any personal grief to a human being must be banned. Oh. Fuck that. Alright, do you really think they were brainwashed to think they were miserable? Yeah, really. Thank you. Please feel free to call me if you prefer. Zoom either works for me. Clearly your attitude doesn't work for me. I am always willing to defend my logic and reasoning. I have no obligation to defend somebody else's. And that's all they're doing. They're just saying somehow I have to explain to you why people are stupid. And I don't. Alright, signed inMendham, the only name under which I publish philosophical commentary. Please do not identify me using a name that jeopardizes my personal security. And so, they just can't, even though they're hiding, they won't allow anybody else to. So it's just such hypocrisy. So anyway, this was the woman's crap. And all of this, And again, she found it obnoxious that I would argue that she shouldn't dox people, because somehow it's really important for people to know my legal name and to know where I live. That somehow that's really important. You can't really understand the philosophy without understanding exactly where the person lives and how they live. You know, whether they live in a mansion or they live in a hovel. All of that stuff's so much more important. No, it's not important at all. It's meaningless. Yeah. And you're only doing it because you know it does violence against them. It does hurt them. And that's why you're doing it. Because you want to hurt people. That's their agenda. They're advocates. Okay. You know, they're not disinterested journalists. They're just propagandists fighting for their silly causes. And pretending, you know, they're non-biased judges or something. Pretending they're doing some honest work. And they're just doing their dishonest cheating for their causes. Okay. So anyway, I don't know if I need. Yeah, I won't bother going through all that stuff again. I mean, it's a video worth watching, I think. Just for the question and answer part mainly, but whatever. It's just that these people really are just, you know, people are just not honest. That's just the fact. You know, they ought to just state before they do any of this crap. They ought to just state that, well, I tend to be sympathetic towards a religious perspective, and I think life is sparkly and fantastically, superly, singularly fun, or something. You know, they should just out themselves as Pollyanna, silly, trivial shit for brains, and you know, make it clear that that's the perspective from which they're going to make this counter argument about how draconian and horrible and monstrous it is that there's people in the world who would defend against wasted torture. Oh, what silly fuckers. You know, wasted torture is a problem somewhere. Yeah. Anyway. Enough said. Yeah, really. There's no point in arguing it any further. So, anyways, probably worth indulging into this mush. But again, this is low watt stuff. Obviously, these are not significant players in the media in any sense. And they're just journalists in their own little brains, you know, not in reality. And such. And so forth. And whatnot. So, till the next time. And such. Yeah, something slightly different. But whatever. This really is. I mean, look, the last few videos I've been pointing out, this isn't that complicated. You either can get it, you know, that there's these machines made by biology that have this powerful mechanism of consciousness, this capacity to feel. And the fact is that there are feelings that are really horrible to have to live with, to have to endure, really difficult to endure. And there's just way too much of that and way too little of the everything's just fine. Yeah, feelings. And it's just a fact. Yeah. Too much pain, too little gain, whatever the gain would be. The compensating, worth it part. Anyway, the profit that the universe is collecting versus the cost, the expense it's paying. I say there's no way to rationally defend the real numbers. You're paying way too much for way too little.